It was a rainy Monday morning when Emily Carter, a young nurse barely in her late 20s, rushed through the hospital gates. Her hair was tied in a neat bun, her blue scrubs slightly damp from the drizzle, and her ID badge swung with every hurried step. She'd been on night shifts for weeks, barely sleeping, but nothing could dull the quiet fire inside her, the desire to help, to heal, to be there when someone needed hope. Inside the emergency ward, chaos was a constant rhythm. The scent of antiseptic, the beeping monitors, the distant cries, it all blended into a melody only those who truly cared could bear. That morning, Emily was assigned to the blood donation drive. Simple task: check donors, label samples, and make sure everything ran smoothly. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. As she checked the donor list, a frantic call echoed from the ER. "We need O-negative blood. Patient critical. No match in the bank." Emily's heart pounded. O-negative was rare. Without hesitation, she raised her hand. "I'm O-negative," she said, her voice steady. The doctor looked at her, exhausted eyes meeting courage. "Emily, you just finished a 12-hour shift." "I know," she replied, rolling up her sleeve. "Let's save him." Minutes later, she sat in the donor chair. The red fluid of life flowed from her veins into the bag, a silent bridge between strangers. On the bed across the hall, behind the frosted glass, a man lay pale and motionless. "A car accident," they said. "Internal bleeding." They didn't even know his name when he arrived. Emily looked through the glass once, just once, and whispered a silent prayer. Hours passed. Her shift ended, but her heart didn't rest. She checked the ICU quietly before leaving. The man was still unconscious, his hand hooked to wires and tubes. For a brief second, she felt something, not pity, not curiosity, but a strange pull, like their destinies had brushed against each other for the first time. 2 days later, the man woke up. His name was Daniel Hayes, a successful entrepreneur, a man who built his fortune from nothing, and most importantly, a single father to a 7-year-old girl named Lily. But none of that mattered in that hospital room. What mattered was that a stranger's blood now ran through his veins. When Daniel regained his strength, he asked the nurse who donated. The staff smiled and pointed to Emily, who was organizing medical files near the window. She didn't expect him to notice her, her world was about work, not recognition. But when their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice still weak. "You saved my life." Emily smiled, brushing it off. "Just doing my job." But Daniel shook his head. "No, you gave more than your duty. You gave a part of yourself to a stranger." They spoke briefly, small talk at first, polite and professional. But Daniel noticed the warmth in her words, the sincerity behind her tired eyes. She wasn't someone who chased money or admiration. She simply cared. That was rare. Days turned into weeks. Daniel recovered quickly, his company resumed, and his little girl Lily often visited him at the hospital. One morning, Emily found Lily sitting alone in the corridor, hugging a small teddy bear. "Hey there," Emily said, kneeling beside her. "You must be Lily, right?" The little girl nodded shyly. "Daddy says an angel saved him." "Was that you?" Emily laughed softly. "I'm no angel, sweetheart. Just a nurse." "Then you're my hero," Lily said, smiling for the first time since her father's accident. That simple exchange melted Emily's heart. She'd lost her own father at Lily's age. The resemblance was uncanny, the innocence, the loneliness. She started visiting Lily whenever she could, reading to her, drawing silly cartoons, making her laugh. For Daniel, watching his daughter smile again was more valuable than any fortune he'd ever earned. When Daniel was finally discharged, he left quietly but not without leaving a note for Emily. "You reminded me what kindness looks like when the world forgets. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate. D." Emily smiled at the note but didn't think much of it. To her, it was just gratitude. To him, it was the beginning of something deeper. Weeks later, Emily's hospital was struggling. Funding was low, and many of her patients couldn't afford treatments. She stayed after hours, using her own money to buy supplies, often skipping meals to help others. She never told anyone, not even her colleagues. One evening, as she walked home, rain pouring once again, a sleek black car stopped beside her. The window rolled down, and to her surprise, it was Daniel. "Emily. You'll catch a cold out here. Need a ride?" She hesitated. She wasn't used to luxury, to comfort. But something about his genuine concern made her accept. Inside the car, the world outside blurred into lights and raindrops. Daniel glanced at her. "I heard about your hospital. You've been doing a lot for people who can't pay. That's incredible." She smiled faintly. "Someone has to care. Sometimes the world forgets to." He nodded silently, admiration growing with every word she spoke. "You know, I never believed people like you existed anymore." She chuckled. "And I never thought millionaires would care enough to notice." That night, he dropped her off at her small apartment, but his mind didn't rest. He couldn't forget her strength, her simplicity. Over the next few days, he began anonymously donating to the hospital, funding treatments, buying equipment, paying medical bills. Emily was stunned when she learned. "Who could be doing all this?" her friend asked. Emily shook her head. "Someone who believes in hope, I guess." Months passed, and fate brought them together again. Lily fell sick, nothing serious, just a bad fever, but Daniel panicked. He called Emily, not as a nurse, but as someone he trusted. Emily rushed over, staying through the night, caring for Lily as if she were her own. When Lily finally slept peacefully, Daniel found Emily by the window, watching the moonlight. "You didn't have to come," he said softly. She turned, her eyes reflecting the gentle glow. "You would have done the same if it were me." Silence lingered, the kind that speaks louder than words. Then Daniel took a deep breath. "You know, ever since the day in the hospital, I've been trying to find the right words to thank you properly. But every time I see you, words don't feel enough." Emily looked away, flustered. "You don't owe me anything, Daniel." He smiled. "Maybe not. But I want to give something, not because I owe it, but because you've reminded me what life really means. You saved me, and somehow, you saved my daughter too." Emily didn't know what to say. She wasn't used to being the reason behind someone's gratitude, let alone affection. She'd built walls around her heart, walls of duty, of humility. But somehow, Daniel's words cracked through them. As the night deepened, Lily stirred in her sleep and whispered, "Daddy, is Nurse Emily going to stay with us forever?" They both froze. Daniel laughed softly, but there was something hopeful in his eyes. Emily smiled, brushing Lily's hair. "I'll always be around when you need me, sweetheart." Over time, that promise became truth. Emily and Daniel's worlds merged, not in a whirlwind romance, but in quiet moments of shared humanity. Dinners that turned into laughter, hospital visits that became family outings, two souls finding solace in what they'd both lost. Daniel wasn't the kind of man to flaunt his wealth, and Emily never cared about it. But one afternoon, he surprised her by visiting the hospital. The staff gathered as he walked in, holding a document. "I heard this hospital saved hundreds of lives," he said. "It's time someone saved the hospital." He handed over a donation deed, millions to keep the facility running for years. Emily was speechless. "Why would you do this?" she whispered. Daniel looked at her gently. "Because one nurse taught me that real wealth isn't in money. It's in compassion. And I want this place to keep creating people like you." Tears filled her eyes as applause echoed through the corridor. For once, she wasn't just a nurse. She was the heartbeat of something greater. Months later, as they stood outside under the same hospital's blooming cherry trees, Daniel turned to her. "Emily, I don't know where life will take us, but I do know I don't want to walk it alone anymore." She smiled softly, eyes glistening. "Neither do I." And as Lily ran up, hugging them both, the camera of fate zoomed out, a picture of love born not from wealth, not from chance, but from a single act of kindness that changed everything. The blood that once saved a life had now given birth to a family. And in the end, Emily realized, when you give without expecting anything in return, life has a way of giving you back more than you ever imagined. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Because sometimes, one act of kindness can change everything. Stay inspired, and remember, love finds you when you least expect it.